Hi, good evening. This is Talk Back. I'm Sheila, and tonight I have the pleasure of meeting with a friend, that long-lost friend, but boy, we're on the same page today, I think, I hope. And as we are doing this show, and you may see it a couple of days later or even a couple of weeks later, we are in the middle of a very tough Democratic primary for President of the United States. So I want to welcome Shannon Louden, who is an attorney, but also a volunteer for Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you very much for having me, Sheila.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
So you're working with the law offices of Shannon Louden.
Yes.
You're doing matrimonial law.
Yes.
As I did for many years.
Yes.
And I see you've got a lovely pin. Tell us about that.
This is a pin of Elizabeth Warren, and her slogan is "Dream big, fight hard," and that's what she's in this race for. She is a fighter, as she said at the debate the other night. She was my law school professor 30 years ago at the University of Pennsylvania. Her husband, Professor Mann, Bruce Mann, was also a professor there.
What did he teach?
I believe administrative law.
Okay, so they were both law professors.
They were both law professors.
So we always think of her as, we know that she was a professor at Harvard University.
Yes.
But she also taught at the University of Pennsylvania.
She was at the University of Pennsylvania first, and then moved to Harvard, as did my professor for voting rights, Lonnie Guinier. Had the same trajectory from University of Pennsylvania Law School to Harvard.
So what did Elizabeth Warren teach you in law school?
She taught contracts to 1Ls.
Okay.
And then she also taught bankruptcy law.
Okay, so that was her interest, that even when she was a professor, and then when she got involved with the Consumer Protection Agency that she started, and got involved with the bankruptcy issues with President Obama's administration, she always had an interest in those issues.
I think she's explained it very well, but I think one of the things I admire about her most is that she had a very different feeling about bankruptcy when she first taught it. And teaching it, and then looking at the effect that it had, and actually people who were filing for bankruptcy, is where she came to her beliefs now about how we need to deal with.
Because she has admitted that she voted differently earlier on in her life, but you're right, when she did her studies, she realized that most people who file for bankruptcy, many of them are filing because of medical bills that they cannot pay. It's a huge thing in this country that I don't think most people appreciate.
No, I believe if you talk to the average voter in the United States, they might believe that anybody filing for bankruptcy didn't take care of their finances very well, and just want them to be wiped away by a bankruptcy declaration. Whereas Elizabeth really looked into it and who was filing for bankruptcy, and was a fierce advocate for consumers. We heard from State Senator Lesser from Massachusetts before I canvassed on Elizabeth's behalf in Longmeadow last weekend, and he conveyed a story where he was working in the Obama White House about 40 feet from David Axelrod, and Elizabeth Warren at that time was a private citizen, but she was a fierce advocate, and she spent hours, months, years advocating for the development and the creation of the Consumer Protection Bureau, which would not have existed but for her energy and dedication.
And then because of politics and probably Mitch McConnell, she couldn't be the head of that agency. Obama had to name someone else.
Correct.
Someone else, I think Caudry, his name was, who went on to try and become a governor of Ohio and lost in the last election. And Elizabeth went on to become a senator from the state of Massachusetts. But let's start from the beginning.
Yes.
So we're living through the era of Trump.
Yes.
It's a nightmare.
Yes.
We have to defeat him.
Yes.
Are the Democrats going about it the right way? I'm always upset about how we seem to very often sabotage ourselves. We just somehow don't have the fight, the kind of depth of intensity that somehow the Republicans managed to come up with, even with, holding their noses and voting for Trump, and now he has become the hypnotic god of so many Americans. How did that happen, and how can we change that?
Well, one of the most troubling things that I found out in the last couple years is that 50% of Americans get their news from Facebook.
Wow.
And 50%. So I believe that's where it starts. I believe what I've understood is that Pluff, who was Obama's campaign manager, credited the Trump campaign He said it was not about our candidate, Hillary Clinton. It was not about the Russian hackers. It was not any other excuse that you may have heard. He credited the Trump campaign with running the best online social media campaign that he had ever seen.
Wow.
And this is Obama's campaign manager saying
this. And
this.
they targeted people to be what? To feel racist, to be anti-immigrant, to give false information, misinformation?
To give misinformation and fake news that in some way touched whoever it was targeted at, so it knew very well to whom it was targeting the information to get them to support Trump as their candidate.
So social media is huge, and you wonder, do the Democrats have their act together enough to be able to identify the voters like the Republicans are doing, to be able to send a message, not a false message, but a truthful message about us. But right now, of course, we're so fractured because
that's
we're
what I was
in the
going to
middle
say.
of the primary.
Yes, correct.
We don't have the message yet.
Correct.
And do we have enough time to coalesce around somebody so that our message will be clear? That's what I worry about.
I
too.
absolutely believe that we do. And I think what's wonderful about a primary in that the downside of a primary is that it gives the opposition the information to potentially target the eventual candidate with. But I also think it allows candidates to distinguish themselves, differentiate among themselves, to help the voters make the right choice for who they believe in. So,
well, right now, as we sit here today, we're going into the South Carolina primary, and up to now, Bernie Sanders, it looks like, has taken the lead in delegates. He seems to have easy availability of money, a good constituent base. People like him, those who are, but he doesn't have the majority yet. So how are we going to coalesce around someone else like Elizabeth to create a singular message? Why should we? How can we do it? How can Elizabeth do it at this point?
Well, I think that we've only heard from 3 states so far, in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. After South Carolina votes tomorrow, we'll have Super Tuesday on Tuesday. That's March 3rd. That's going to be a huge day for every campaign, in that 34% of the delegates for the United States in the Democratic Convention in Milwaukee this July will be chosen on March 3rd.
Right. I think there are about almost 4,000 total that are chosen, and whoever gets the nomination is supposed to get a majority. I think it's something like 1,991 delegates, something along that line. Yeah.
So let me respond further. I apologize. So Senator Sanders, what I've learned in doing a number of campaigns over the last 50 years is he has a tremendous leg up, so to speak, in that he ran a national campaign for president 4 years ago. He has contributors to return to. He has a message. He had the experience of running for president before, and Elizabeth's never done that before. But she felt called to be a part of this race because of her beliefs and what she didn't see being offered as a candidate in Senator Sanders.
What's so great about her that differentiates her from Sanders?
Well, I think a main thing that you and I have talked about is she is a capitalist. She really believes in democracy, but she is a capitalist. The other thing that I think is wonderful is that I do see her as a unifying candidate. People have really tried to portray her as a Bernie Sanders wannabe, I guess, for lack of a better term, as too progressive, as too radical. I believe if anybody took a look at the 75 plans we've got on her website, elizabethwarren.com, they would see that she truly is progressive, but also would appeal to the moderates. I see her as a unifying candidate. I also believe that as a woman, and having watched her in action for 30 years, she is somebody who develops coalitions, collaborations. I see that as maybe the female energy or whatnot that I believe we need in the White House, especially in the time that we're living, as far as what we've dealt with as a divided society and a very fractured society.
You know, this is the 100th anniversary of women having the right to vote in the country. It was 1920, the 19th Amendment. I'd wish it was the 20th Amendment. It would be so much nicer. But
20th for
it's
2020,
100
yes.
years, and you think we're talking about it enough? No. Do you think we're trying to make sure that we have a woman president for the first time? So many other countries are way ahead of us in that area. And it's just so disappointing that people are even talking about the fact is, well, she's a shrill woman and they don't like the way she talks, and they would never say those kinds of things if it were a man. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
So there's still that kind of anti-woman prejudice that exists in this country.
I agree with you.
And
I think that also is unfortunately promulgated and continued as a story by the press.
And what I found so interesting is a lot of people thought that she wasn't kind of warm enough or engaging enough. Yet, as the campaign progressed initially, the audiences really loved her, and she started taking the selfies with them, and people were saying, wow, she really is connecting on a human, personal level. But then what happened? Was it that the plans were so detailed that, and so much in the weeds, that people could kind of hunt around in there and find fault with them?
Nope.
And maybe she needs a more overarching general issue, because as you said, if you're only getting your news from Facebook, you kind of need one great soundbite, one great slogan. You know, I mean, Trump has his MAGA business, right? What is Elizabeth? I like dream big, fight hard. I don't hear that enough from her. So why did she really have a great trajectory upward, and everybody said, wow, and then it sort of went downhill a little bit? What happened?
My belief about that, and it's not anything connected with the campaign, but what I believe that I saw, Sheila, is this. She proved herself as the incredibly intelligent and talented and committed fighter that she is, and then people started to want to put her in a lane, so to speak. And I believe that she got tagged in Bernie Sanders' lane instead of in her own lane. And really, as I've watched how she's been covered, they either want to have her in with Bernie Sanders or they want a moderate lane. And she's in between. And they don't want to really give her own lane as far as what she appeals to.
But she herself has to distinguish that and has to tell everybody that she's not in Bernie's lane, because sometimes it appears like in the last couple of debates she's gone more after Bloomberg. And why? I think maybe she needs to distinguish herself more from Bernie, because you're right. The media, the press, they want to fight. They want a conflict. Yeah. They've got the moderate group here. They've grouped them all together, the Bloomberg and the Klobuchar and the Biden and the Buttigieg. And then they have the Sanders and the Warren. And they're saying that, well, pick one.
Correct.
And that's not the way she wants us to look at it. But is she distinguishing herself enough in that middle unity basket to make a difference? And
absolutely.
She needs to do that.
And I believe she did that at the last debate. The last debate was very difficult to watch when you saw Mayor Buttigieg and Senator Sanders basically screaming at one another and not listening to one another. And Elizabeth stayed out of the fray. But I think what I took from that is a very important statement. I would make a better president than Bernie Sanders. She distinguished herself there. I think the only thing that I would say as far as what's happened since the initial trajectory when she came out with all of her wonderful plans is that she is a very kind and empathetic woman and has told us that she is absolutely not running a negative campaign. And I think that that really sometimes hurts people who don't then get involved and say, there's a difference between being negative and being distinguished and distinctive about who you are. She's always been very clear about who she is. I just think it's been how her story has been caught up. And I've been asked at a number of DTCs where I've spoken to speak about
Democratic town committees.
I apologize. Worked in Washington. I'm a lady of acronyms. There we go.
Right,
But to differentiate her from Senator Sanders, and the two things I would say are just look at the background. She grew up in Oklahoma. She got married very young and had children very young. She was a special education teacher. A lot of people don't appreciate that teaching aspect of her. She was my teacher 30 years ago at law school. So she is a really capable conveyor of information.
Was she a popular teacher?
Oh, yes.
I think at Harvard, too, she won awards for being one of the most effective teachers.
She's an incredibly effective teacher, yes. And the other thing that I'll say is that, and again, I'm not here to to denigrate another candidate. I think they're all wonderful, and I think anybody but Trump is who we eventually will have to coalesce behind and support to win the White House again. But Senator Sanders speaks often about having had the same dialogue for 30 years and pursuing the same agenda for 30 years. And my question for that is, if you've talked about it for 30 years, why have you not been able to bring to fruition and through legislation and through your actions what you've been speaking about? Whereas I know Elizabeth to be a formidable fighter and somebody who I believe will get the job done. So I think the wonderful thing that really appeals to me about her plans are that they are so detailed. So it's not just a plan. It's not just a soundbite. It is an extensive plan that not only gives you the information about what she's trying to accomplish, but how she will get it done.
Okay.
Now,
so she has a
obviously,
website. What is the website?
the website is www.elizabethwarren.com.
Okay. Everything is laid out there.
We have more than 75 plans now.
Okay.
All of it's laid
Well,
out.
You were talking about the fact earlier that everybody gets their information from Facebook.
Yes.
So what is she doing on Facebook, on social media to
She's doing a
reach
lot.
people?
She has a tremendous staff, yes.
Okay.
And the way in which Facebook works is that people who are on Facebook need to like and then share her posts, and then that gets shared among their friends who hopefully would be empathetic and want to hear from their friends as to their beliefs. And that's how we build the grassroots campaign that she has worked on so hard.
I don't know if people appreciate the enormous undertaking it is to start a campaign like this
yes.
in the hours. And the money it takes. So you're sort of seeing the inside of this a lot. Tell us
Yes.
about, just what it's like on the grind from day to day in doing this and getting volunteers and going around to campaign and figuring out strategically, where do you talk first? Where do you go? Do you go to the library? Do you go outdoors to get 20,000 people? Do you talk to 5 people in the community room? How does all that work?
Well, I think you've hit on a very important topic, and that is just the amount of time and energy it takes to run a national campaign. You have to have a tremendous support network supporting you underneath. And assisting you in determining what your priorities are. And we've got a wonderful campaign staff. She has had what we call boots on the ground in all 50 states and 7 territories and whatnot for a year now. Right now,
all these people, you're a volunteer.
I'm a volunteer. Right now, I will tell you, in 31 states, we have paid staff. But unfortunately, Connecticut's primary is not until April 28th. So we are now all volunteers working for Elizabeth.
Okay. Why
in Connecticut, I apologize. Yes, yeah. And then we have our liaisons to the national campaign.
Right.
And then through Elizabeth and her staff, we develop priorities and then figure out how to get across the message and what's the best use of her time versus volunteer time. Yes.
So the primary system, though, is interesting how it works, and I think many people are not aware.
Yes.
So, for example, I remember in the Republican Party, many of the primaries that you go and vote for are winner-take-all. So if Trump, for example, gets 35% of the vote and the other candidates get 17%, 16%, it doesn't matter. The plurality, the person that gets the plurality of the vote wins all the delegates in that state. And that's why Trump was able to amass so much so quickly. But in the Democratic Party, and I'm thinking like in California, there are probably several hundred delegates from California, right? But they're divided up into delegate districts.
Yes.
But in order to get a delegate from that district, you have to get at least 15% of the votes in that district.
Correct. You have to be a viable candidate, is what that's called.
Viable candidate.
Yes.
So theoretically, a person who can get a plurality in the state, let's say only gets 38% of all the millions of votes of California Democrats, could win 80% of the delegates because they can get that reach that threshold in
the district.
So is that a fair system? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Or should it just be proportional for 35% of the total vote, you get 35% of the delegates? That's not how it works, though.
Right, and I think that something that Elizabeth has been very clear about that I think is even more distorted is the Electoral College vote. and how that really distorts and allowed Trump to win instead of Hillary Clinton, who won the popular vote by 3 million votes. So that certainly is a system that we need to take a look at. What we're doing, for example, in Connecticut, just to get back to your question about the time and energy and where the resources go, we have very capable people helping to determine that. In Connecticut right now, what we are doing is, I would say, a 3- or 4-fold effort. First effort is we're supporting Elizabeth in Super Tuesday states. So I've been up to canvass in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts. I'll be going to Maine tomorrow. Maine and Massachusetts.
You're personally going.
I'm personally going.
Can you do it through telephonic communications?
Well, that's the second thing. We're doing phone banking.
Phone banking. Right.
So I've done that. We also do texting. So there's a personal text, and all of this is available if you just join into our campaign. You join the All In for Warren community, and we'll set you right up. So that's what we're doing until we have our turn here in Connecticut, when hopefully people for the states in which we've canvassed are going to come back down and join us to canvass down here.
Well, hopefully by April, what day is it?
April 28th.
April 28th, it will still matter.
I trust that it will.
I hope it will.
And you asked a question that I want to come back to before, and that is talking about all the different candidates we have and how we're going to potentially end up with many different delegates supporting many different candidates. I don't know, but that would lead me to believe that we may be headed toward a contested convention in Milwaukee in July. And that's what you were describing, which is that you get delegates depending on the number of votes over 15% in each district. And then also, Sheila, there are what are called superdelegates. So the congressional representatives, the senators from each state, and a number of other people can become superdelegates. So it's a very interesting process. I myself am trying to become a delegate on Elizabeth's behalf to go to Milwaukee in July. But that will depend on the number of votes and districts and delegates that she has from Connecticut. But getting back to that, I believe in the primary system. I believe our democracy functions best when we provide voters with the most choice.
And do you agree that the primary system should be open or closed? What do you think about that? In other words, an open primary, like in New Hampshire, you can be a Republican or an unaffiliated voter or independent and go in and choose a Democratic ballot and maybe do some mischief. If you're if you're a Republican,
Correct.
you
Yes.
want to choose a Democrat that you think maybe Trump can beat, and
Yes.
so forth. And then I think Connecticut is a closed primary.
We are a closed
that
primary.
means you must be a Democrat to vote in the Democratic primary or a Republican to vote in the Republican primary.
I think the most troubling thing about a closed primary is this. At least in my town of Andover, the most registered voters we have are unaffiliated. Mm-hmm. And so when you get to a primary, unaffiliated voters in a closed primary have no vote.
Unless they switch their party, but
unless they register as a Democrat or Republican or the Green Party or Working Families Party who's endorsed Elizabeth.
But there's a deadline.
But there's a deadline.
They have to
Correct.
meet. So yeah, I agree with you, but shouldn't people be educated that if you want to say in who's running for president, you need to join a party?
No,
No?
I believe everybody should have a say in who's running for president. I don't think you have to be a member of the two-party system, so to speak, or be a member of a party. South Carolina tomorrow has an open primary.
Well, open primary is another story.
Yes, yeah.
I might believe in that.
Yes.
But if you're a member of a party, it should be, well, we can...
I would love for people to be members of the party.
Yes.
That's true.
Now,
but I think in Connecticut, and I don't know the statistics, I would be interested to know, but I think we may have a majority of unaffiliated or independent voters.
I think you're probably
And
right.
they get
at this
no
point.
say in the primaries.
Yeah.
They get no say who the initial pick is, who ends up being
Well,
the candidates.
I asked them, why are you unaffiliated?
Oh, I asked the same thing.
And you have to understand, I had Secretary of State Denise Merrill here, and
Yes.
she explained independent is a party in Connecticut, so you can't call yourself independent. You must be
unaffiliated.
If
Correct.
you say independent, they register you in the independent party. But that's another
That's what
story.
Senator Sanders is recognized as, an independent, yes.
But I think he had to pledge to be a Democrat in order to run in the Democratic National.
And in order to be in the
Democratic
caucus,
primary. I
in
think
the
so.
Democratic caucus
Yeah.
as a senator.
Yeah, he did. And he votes with obviously with
Yes.
the Democrats. So what can we do now to help Elizabeth Warren get there if we're a little bit discouraged? What can we do to help her besides sending money, which we really can't solicit here?
Nope. The best way you can help her is to get involved.
Okay.
So if you go to elizabethwarren.com, On the website, there's an ability to volunteer. On the volunteer page, if you go to the very bottom of the page, it's called Join All In for Warren. If you join All In for Warren, you then can choose the groups of whom you're then going to be a part of in that community. There are hundreds of groups. The group that one of the groups of whom I'm a member is Connecticut for Warren. And in that group, if you join that group, you would receive all of the posts that we put into that of all the opportunities to help our campaign in Connecticut and elsewhere. So, for example, on that are the phone banks that people are organizing. On that are the rides to Maine and Massachusetts for this coming weekend. We have members who went out to California to help canvass out there for her. It's another Super Tuesday state. So to help Elizabeth is to be all in for Warren on our website and to join a community, a group on the All In for Warren group. And they're women for Warren, they're lawyers for Warren, they're LGBTQ for Warren, there's moms for Warren, anything you want to be a part of. But if you join Connecticut for Warren, you would receive all of the information that we're specifically putting out to our Connecticut volunteers as ways in which they can become further involved.
They can help in all the upcoming primaries before Connecticut, one way or the other, by going there personally or by phone banking or whatever.
And the other way in which we're reaching out is we do have an organizer for each congressional district. So I live in the 2nd Congressional District, as do you, I believe.
Right.
So Joe Courtney is our representative. And the 2nd Congressional District, Sheila, has 83 towns. So 83 of the 169 towns in Connecticut are in the 2nd Congressional District.
Okay.
So a colleague and I divided up the district. Judd Melon is the coordinator or organizer for the southern half of the 2nd Congressional District. I'm trying to tackle the northern half. But we have a representative in each congressional district. And our effort is to get out to the local Democratic town committees and find willing volunteers within there, because that's how Connecticut happens at a local level.
Right. And one of the things that Senator Warren has done is that she's not taking PAC money or big corporate donations.
Correct.
She wants donations just from
total grassroots effort.
Grassroots people.
Yes.
And you got involved in politics. I know you said you very much admired her teaching and her husband's teaching. But why are you involved? What
For Elizabeth?
Yes, and just in general, why is democratic politics so important to you in your life?
Well, my parents had me hanging door hangers on doors in West Hartford, Connecticut 50 years ago for Katie Reynolds, who was running for mayor of West Hartford. And ever since then, I've had the bug for politics and the election. I think it's critical to our country. To be educated and about who the different candidates are, but also to be involved. In my community, I'm the chair of the Board of Education. I was the chair of our Democratic Town Committee, serve on a bunch of other committees, and it's very important to be involved in creating what you want in your community and for our democracy, what we want in our country.
That's great, and I hope as someone in the Board of Education, you're encouraging more civics classes and more involvement in history of politics.
Well, and in this 100th year, it's wonderful.
It's
I'm also encouraging to look back at the important suffragette movement. It's also the 100th year of the League of Women Voters. That's how my mom got involved in politics 50 years ago when we moved to Connecticut. She's been incredibly involved with the wonderful women there. They still all get together from the League from 50 years ago.
And they are the ones that should be running these debates because they would be doing a much better substantive job than some of these media people who only want conflict and noise. You know, that's what they like. That's what sells ads.
That's what brings the people to watch.
But how are we going to get the young people? Does Elizabeth have a strong outreach to the young
Absolutely.
people? College community. That's very, very important. They don't vote in the numbers that they really should. If they did, Democrats would win.
Well, I think there's two ways. Number one, you have to have a candidate who makes them want to vote. And number two, you have to have people within the colleges and universities who are encouraging them to do that. And we do have that. And in fact, the reason I'm driving to Maine in part tomorrow is to take students from Wesleyan. We also have students coming from Yale to go to Maine to canvass for Elizabeth Warren. So I'm driving up a bunch of students tomorrow.
Oh, great.
And it's wonderful. We have a wonderful coordinator, Maya Gumber, at Wesleyan. She's the one who's coordinating all of our students in Connecticut. We have other students involved at Yale. I'm sure there are ones at Eastern and Southern Connecticut and St. Joseph's and all over the state. I'm just not as familiar with them just
Right.
yet. But we have a wonderful organizer in Maya.
That's great. So, good luck.
Thank you.
When Elizabeth Warren made her announcement speech in Lawrence, Massachusetts,
Yes.
in front of a factory that women had fought for their rights as workers, it was a thrilling speech. It was
Yes.
the best opening speech of any of the candidates. I wish her well. I think she would make the best president.
I agree.
I don't know. Let's hope for the best. And the most important thing is to get rid of Trump.
I agree.
Absolutely. It's great having you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Good luck in all your endeavors. And
Thank you for
I'll
this
be on the-
opportunity.
I and my friends will be on the campaign trail too. It's important that
Wonderful.
everybody get involved, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
www.elizabethwarren.com.
Get involved in any part of the campaign, because as a voter, you've got to be concerned. This is an important time in our country. See you next time on Talk Back. Good night. Okay.
Wonderful.
Take care.
Yeah.